who played that, who we will not see today. But it looks like we're getting into our first game. It is going to be what looks like a Zulok from Zoro here, going against the Control Warrior of Langweixian, aka LonelyGod. And this matchup is pretty. I mean, it used to be pretty bad. For the warrior, basically, if you didn't get Fiery Warwick's early or have a brawl to clear the opponent's board, then it could be pretty difficult. But nowadays, I mean, as long as you can stabilize as a warrior, you can, get things like Justicar to help you stay alive. But looks like LonelyGod has opted for a greedy version with Ysera. Let's see if he has any more high cost minions. Sometimes you play this control warrior by just trying to stay alive, but looks like LonelyGod has actually inserted some threats in here.
Yeah, and so with a lot of control warriors, what you see is that they'll have a lot of just options for removal, and then they'll get late game. But two things that can be a vulnerability for control warrior is card draw and being able to handle things late in the game when it gets down to fatigue. So I've actually seen a lot of control warriors start to run some discover mechanics, just because that gives them the opportunity to have that more card draw, more options if they want those. But it's pretty classic control warrior list, but like you said, some variations with that Ysera.
Right, and Zoro choosing right now what to go off the Discover with this Dark Peddler. I believe it was Soulfire, Argent Squire. As we do see, he does go with the Argent Squire. Looking for just more, just stickiness on the board in general, as we're likely going to see a Bash here just take some of this damage off the field. Would be a bit too greedy, I feel, to go for the Armor's Miss, so definitely a solid play here from LonelyGod. Zoro, though, still has threats, for days right now, or at least for the next turn, at the very least. But going to be this Knife Juggler and this Sticky Argent Squire coming in the field. He also has that Nerubian Egg as well for the following turn, so worst case scenario, he can go into tap and Nerubian Egg. As for LonelyGod here, not really too much to do. I doubt he's going to go for the Cruel Task plus Execute, so might just be the Armor Smith here, and yes, he just play it out.
Right. It kind of feels bad to play the Armor Smith, but it's always good to put that on the field versus a Knife Juggler, because it's pretty likely that it's going to get hit by those knives and get some, some value there. Not only soaking up damage, but putting up some armor. And if we do see anything like Shield Slams coming out, that's going to be a good way to utilize some of that early armor. And of course, armor early on, super effective versus Zoo decks like this. Of course, this is the demon variety of Zoos, so not super crazy like we've used to see with some Zoo. And yeah, there's that Shield Slam I was talking about. Extremely effective at dealing with a lot of these early threats.
Right, and looks like he's going to opt to play that right now. I mean, it seems like a bit of a waste maybe because you're just killing off a Knife Juggler, but this is for temple purposes, right? You want to get the board back. You can't let the Zoo run amok. And actually not going to commit that Cruel Taskmaster. It definitely makes sense. These days Control Warrior has a bit of a hard time activating the Execute. Nowadays Slam is actually back in Control Warrior, but a lot of times you don't run two Cruel Taskmasters either. So it definitely makes sense for LonelyGod to hold on to that Cruel Taskmaster, who might not have a way to kill something big coming up in these next few turns.
Right. So the big thing and the reason that's kind of worth it is to eliminate the early game from Zoo decks like this. However, this deck actually has a lot more of a mid to late game when you think about it. Not only just because he has that Mal'Ganis in hand, but because there's a lot of sort of mid game threats, things like the Loatheb, but also Doom Guards and Power Overwhelmings can turn any early game advantage into a late game advantage. So you definitely have to keep an eye on that.
So apparently the game really wants Zoro to take Soulfire, and it looks like he might oblige. This is the second time he's seen the Soulfire come out of that Dark Peddler, and has a lot of burst in hand. Does Zoro with that Power Overwhelming as well as the Soulfire. Has also the Loatheb for potentially the next turn if he feels like his board might be in danger of getting brawled here. Harrison Jones is reasonable. It's not actually the worst thing ever. You'd rather have at least a minion to play out than anything else here. So Harrison Jones will be okay here. And yeah, like you mentioned before, the Zoo, runs definitely this late game. You can see it in his hand right now with that Loatheb and the Mal'Ganis. And it's kind of funny, right? It basically acts, it's kind of like a mid-range Zoo, which is a bit of an oxymoron. But nowadays, that's how it operates. And we're going to see basically the popping of this egg and Loatheb right afterward, which means that this board is going to be hard to get rid of.
Yeah, especially with Lotheb there too. I remember when Lotheb was added to the game, and it's sort of that nail in the coffin card. You establish a board, you play Lotheb, and you're like, what? What are you going to do about it? And really, there's oftentimes not a lot that you can do about it. I remember Alkali Circle combo is one of the few board clears that works under Lotheb just because it's free. Well, essentially, you still have to have enough mana to put everything down. But
Right.
the idea is that you establish a big board, and usually that's weak to board clear. But one version of a card that does still clear the board pretty decently is that uh,
In
man,
Warrior
yeah, it's
Brawl.
yeah, is Brawl. It does cost 10 mana, so as long as you're before there is you don't have to worry about it.
Right, and speaking of Brawl, Sylvanas obviously always wins the Brawl no matter what, because even if she loses the Brawl, she still steals your guy. So this is a bit of a tough situation here for Zoro. Doesn't really want to lose a Brawl, but also doesn't really want to give up, minions on the board right now. And so, yeah, he's just gonna trade in the Loth. Oh, loses his biggest minion. That's really, really painful. Um,
Ouch.
yeah, I mean, he could have. The thing was, it was a pretty big risk here by LonelyGod. I mean, if Zoro, called his bluff, he could have just hit the face, got everything in the face there, and done a ton of damage. But obviously, you get really punished if there's, something like a Brawl coming in. And actually, this Revenge would have been activatable as well.
Oh
So, but anyway, gonna be the Baron Geddon, not the best Garen Bedded, the best Baron Geddon. I'm gonna kill a couple of imps off, but I'm going to create another one as well. And BGH right on time. Hello,
man.
friend. He's got the
I
beast in
mean,
his sights.
yeah, it's not even necessarily a bad thing to save the BGH for later because I mean Baron summons Mal'Ganis next turn anyway for free, and then you can I guess although he does have with the
Yeah,
oof.
he just wants to get stuff on the field right now and put more pressure onto his opponent. And unfortunately for LonelyGod, he doesn't fall below 12 health, which means that this Revenge still isn't activated. Well, I mean, you can play it, but it's not nearly as good, obviously, as dealing 3 damage to everything. And
Yeah,
so,
that would have been amazing, even game winning if he had been able to deal with that. Now the big struggle is though the Mal'Ganis. That's definitely a way that this could swing back towards Zoro's favor if you don't have an option to deal with it. However, we see for 3 mana you've got the Taskmaster execute combo in hand, so that's definitely a good way to deal with any of those big threats.
right. And let's count the damage on the table. 4, 8, and then 14. There's 14 damage on the table. So, and there's also 4 damage in hand, whether it's the Mal'Ganis or the Sulfur. It's basically the same thing. So yeah, LonelyGod needs to get something done right now. He's going to see that the Mal'Ganis come out here, which is actually going to heal up this Imp King boss back to 4 health once the Mal'Ganis dies, which is an interesting interaction. Nice and healthy now is the Imp King boss, but it's a bit unfortunate there for LonelyGod that he didn't really have a clean way to deal with that. And is there lethal here for Zoro? Let's see. So 11 plus 4 is 15. So 1 damage off lethal, I believe.
Oh man. You could always tap into something
Right, but you have to
too.
Soulfire first, just in case it's an
Right.
expensive minion that you can't play out. So he's going to do this, and we have a 50-50 chance for lethal right now with this Void Caller, I believe. 8, 11,
Oh
yeah.
man.
So 50-50 right here. Let's see if he can make it happen. If not, a Revenge could be the start of a comeback for LonelyGod. And I believe you just go for it, right? I don't...
I mean, you have to go for it at this point. If you don't, then you're gonna be facing off against Revenge. Big turnaround there. Oh, it
Oh,
does
gets the
hit the
ping.
face.
Wow. That's
Man,
going to
that's
be game number 1 for Zoro. He takes a 1-0 lead off of that lovely knife juggler.
that's how you win esports, man. It's
That's how you win
wow.
the video game. Uh,
And there he
any,
goes. So that's gonna do it for our first game. Once again, there are gonna be 3 best of threes from the round of 16 broadcast today. So if you thought you missed anything, don't worry, you're still coming in right at the beginning. We've got 4 more games, or 3 more best of
5s.
5s.
2 more best of 5s after this one, which is
Right.
1 game in. Maximum 4 games left in here. Minimum, or yeah, it would be minimum if it were end short. It'd be 2 games. So anyway, Lots of random numbers and math thrown out there, but in any case, if you're wondering who the Chinese casters are, it is Snowkiss in the center, though, with Chu on the left, who actually participated in this tournament earlier, and I believe that's Boer on the right, who participated in this tournament earlier as well. And basically, Chu, he was in the group with LonelyGod, that LonelyGod got out of. Now he is your caster. And actually, Chu, his bounty coming into the tournament was 50 yen. And Shrinkin had quite the laugh at that one. Basically, most of these players had, 2,000 or above bounty on their heads. And, basically the first seeds had something around 10,000. Some of them had 7,000. And then Chu comes in, he has a 50 yen. And we're
Like,
like,
whoa, watch out for this guy. But to be fair, I mean, you got to start somewhere, and that means he has a lot less to lose, right? So,
I suppose. Also, anyway, if you're wondering how these groups were put together, or the groups that we have already, kind of advanced out of, basically there are the number one seeds who qualified by either qualifying for BlizzCon or winning a gold series. And the second tier of players are players who won kind of third party championships. The third tier were nominees from the Hearthstone team story. Basically, every team nominated a player. And then the fourth tier were basically nominees from streamer sites. So, for instance, Chu came from, it was either Douyu TV or Panda TV. But that's how we've chosen our groups. If you're wondering how the players in this particular match qualified for this, Zoro, he qualified for BlizzCon, so that's how he got in here. And for LonelyGod, he won the Gold Series Chongqing, so that's how he was able to get here. So
yeah, Choo came from Panda TV. There you go.
Right. So both of these players, obviously, with a bunch of accomplishments to their name. Zoro, I actually casted him in the Celestial Invitational as well, so he was able to qualify for that. So Zoro doing very well lately.
Yeah, Zoro, always one of the standout players from Celestial. We got a chance to see him in pretty much every league that Celestial's ever had a player in.
Right.
So definitely exciting to see him have a lot of success. And should be getting in here to game number 2 in not too long. Do need to get through these games because it's actually going to be a pretty long day, especially if all the games go all the way to 5 games. That's a lot of Hearthstone.
Yeah, yesterday was actually a pretty long day. We did 5 SF5s. We finished Group H. And not only that, there were pretty long breaks in between the series, and on top of that, there was Control Priest and Control Warrior.
Oh gosh!
So, yeah, things definitely took a long time yesterday, but we got through it. Or maybe I guess I just got through it. Shrink kind of died at the end there, but in any case, I wonder what the delay is here for coming into this next game. Might be some issues. I'm not quite sure.
Just say there's not too much like technical difficulties in Hearthstone. Like sometimes like your mouse stops working. Depends on like if you're playing on touchpads or anything. There can be some interesting things happen. But yeah, just hopefully getting into our next game here pretty soon. I would expect to see Zoro do fairly well in this match. He did have his Druid banned, but I don't know if you'd necessarily call him the favorite. Certainly has more competitive experience. But still some room left for. I mean, anything can happen. It's Hearthstone.
I mean, let's take a look at the strategy. By the way, he obviously started off with the zoo there, and he has Paladin and Shaman. Shaman is always going to be aggro Shaman, and Paladin is most likely going to be Secret Paladin. So Zoro going with a very aggressive lineup, basically almost mimicking that of Firebat at the World Championships a couple of years ago. If you switch, Paladin with basically Miracle Rogue and a couple other things as well. Or he switched Shaman with Hunter. So yeah, basically going with a really aggressive lineup here, and we've seen that have some success in the past, but it might run into some trouble if another player, for instance, goes with a very control-oriented lineup, like for instance Life Coach at this past year's World Championships. For instance, Valera yesterday, he ran an all-control lineup. It was Reno Lock, Control Priest, Patron Warrior, which I was a bit surprised at. I thought he might run one Control Warrior in that instance, and he also ran Freeze Mage. So it'll be interesting to see if Zoro can take this championship down, or if he runs into basically, a person who ran all, defensive lineup.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to see the sort of reaction between decks where you have an all between players where you have an all aggressive versus an all defensive lineup. I don't know what's your perspective on the status of aggression versus defense in Hearthstone right now. It feels like control decks are super strong, and that aggro is maybe having a struggle until you get to Shaman.
Yeah, until Shaman just kills you, right? That's basically the answer to Reno decks. You just kill them before they get to turn 6, and just use Shaman that way. But I mean, I think it's pretty balanced, honestly. It's pretty crazy because throughout a lot of Hearthstone's history, when there weren't that many options to choose from, for instance, in the summer of 2014, it was just mid-range Druid and Miracle Rogue, and that was it. Those were two strongest decks, and if you didn't play that in a tournament, then you're insane. You're going to lose. So it's really cool to see all these different types of decks, both aggro and control working. I mean, the players that have advanced to the round of 16, there's no consensus. There's no like everyone's playing aggro or everyone's playing control. Everyone's playing this deck or that deck. So it's really refreshing to see, honestly. And it's basically just a kind of a meta triangle, right, or meta circle. Something kills something, but then it dies to a third deck, for instance. So we're still having this delay. We'll just let you know, with that win with the Warlock, Zoro has Paladin and Shaman left. We mentioned that before. LonelyGod has Druid, Rogue, which is a bit of a surprise. We haven't seen too many Rogues, and he has Warrior as well. Obviously, we saw that was Control Warrior. So how do you like the odds for both of these players? Obviously, Zoro with that lead so far, but likely Secret Paladin and then Aggressive Shaman versus likely Midrange Druid, likely Oil Rogue, and Control Warrior.
Yeah, at least for me, I think the biggest thing that I'm going to be watching for is the aggressive matchups. So things like maybe a Murloc Paladin.
We have seen Murloc Paladins, and we've actually seen a surprising amount of Murloc Paladins. And not only that, but the Murloc Paladins actually advancing to the round of 16. For instance, Sleepy Shaman advanced with one, Fu Oliver advanced with one. But looks like after an extended break, we are finally going to be getting into game number 2. It's going to be what I'm assuming is a Secret Paladin versus this Control Warrior. Now, I think, if I remember correctly, it was a long time ago, I mean, Group E, but I think that LonelyGod only runs one Brawl. And obviously that kind of hurt him in the last game, and it will definitely hurt him in this game if he isn't able to draw that one Brawl.
Right. Some warriors go more control heavy than others. If you're running like Fatigue Warrior, I think that's like a super heavy control where you're running things like, Death Lords, Double Brawl, maybe even some Bouncing Blades, all kinds of crazy stuff in those kinds of decks. But this does look pretty standard. I haven't seen anything too weird out of the mulligans. And yeah, this is going to be the mid-range version of Paladin, but it does still have secrets in it. I'm just not sure if it's like the super heavy secret Paladin.
Right. I mean, we've seen mid-rangey types of paladins. I'm forgetting who ran a very mid-rangey type of secret paladin. We'll see how aggressive this curves or not. Actually, that's a divine favor. So it looks like Zoro is going to be looking to, put on the hurt and just basically, flood the board as fast as possible and refill his hand with a divine favor.
Yeah, and Divine Favor, I mean, it's one of the best cards in the game. Saw a very impassioned post written. I think it was Tiddler actually who wrote that post on the status of the balance of Hearthstone and talked about how card advantage was ridiculously effective. And if you can play a good Divine Favor, I mean, that just blows the game wide open because you can just blow through your deck, and especially if you're running Mysterious Challenger, that just like sucks so many cards right out of your deck. It's pretty ridiculous the speed at which Paladin can get cards out of their deck and onto the board.
Yeah, exactly. And that Divine Favor can be absolutely devastating. Mysterious Challenger is a nice card too, as well. And Zoro will be looking to play that right on turn 6, and just looking really good for Zoro right now. The one thing is that LonelyGod is going to be looking to basically use all of the options he has in his hand to make sure he doesn't die, obviously. So there might not be an option for a good Divine Favor later, but for the moment, Zoro, even without the Divine Favor, has a pretty good curve here.
All right, well, let's go ahead and see what the next few are. It kind of feels bad to use Keeper of Oldham aggressively. It's because it's such a strong defensive option. But I mean, it's so early on in the game that even just buffing up one of your Silverhand recruits is actually still pretty effective. And this is still a very difficult board to deal with. You're one turn ahead of Brawl, and yeah, I think this weapon is pretty much the best thing to deal with the threats on board.
Right. And I mean that's basically why Keeper of Alderman. It was really crazy, right? Because the first thing when people saw that card, the first thing that people thought was, you know, this will work. This might work in a mid-range paladin, but you know, there's so many other options for forward drops. But it turns out it's just really good in secret paladin because you're most likely going to get a pretty fast start, and then from there, um, you know, you can probably be able to buff your guy, and it ends up being really devastating. But we have a pretty big board here, and the answer to my question from earlier. Wow, that's a really good card to pick up right now.
Oh my
Wow.
gosh. He's got double whirlwind effects, and I mean, if you get something with one health off the shredder, then that's even better. Man, to be fair though, divine favor is still going to be really, really big.
Right.
You're going to come into turn 6, get a big, secret paladin turn off of your mysterious challenger, and then fill you up your hand the next turn too. So, really good spots for both players to be in, but this is still a pretty big hit for Zoro to take.
Exactly. And I mean, I don't see the hesitation here, to be completely honest. I think you just run your Despite into that shredder. You need to start clearing this board as fast as possible. I was about to say that Brawl wasn't picked up, which was unfortunate, but now that this, you know, Revenge is at the field. But, you know, one person's good fortune deserves, you know, good fortune from the other player, and a pretty big minion coming off of this shredder, 4/3 Succubus.
Yeah, Succubus, I think is like one of the top 3 or 4 stat-wise cards that you can get off of that. And of course, Mysterious Challenger is one of the top cards in
Ooh.
Hearthstone.
Right.
So,
Full Christmas tree coming out here for
jeez.
Zoro. And how do you deal with this if you're Lonely God? I mean, look at his hand. It's, you know, 7, 9, 6, 6. He has a Fiery War X, but it's going to be get down! And then another guy gets bigger anyway, so this you can't deal with this right now. You might. I mean, you're facing. I mean, you know that's competitive spirit, right? Because there's 5 secrets on the table, unless it's Eye for an Eye or Sacred Trial, which would be very surprising. But
Man, I got so owned by Sacred Trial the other day. I've actually started to see some pro players like experimenting with it on stream. The only problem is that it's so situational that it's just like it's too risky to put in the deck.
right. But anyway, as far as this board is concerned, I mean, there's 11 damage on board. It's going to turn to 13 if you just sit back and do nothing or play a minion, for instance. And so basically anything kills you. You know, True Silver. I guess you know Coghammer wouldn't kill you, but you know, Consecrate would, for instance, if you don't do anything right here. So it looks like it's going to be the Shield Maiden. It's going to be turned into a 5/1, I believe. Yeah, there goes a Repentant. And let's see if Zoro can manage to do 20 health. Probably not, but like we've been mentioning this entire game, that Divine Favor is going to do some work.
Man, all right. Well, Divine Favor is certainly
Ooh.
the big draw here. I
That I
haven't
mean,
seen what it does yet.
picking up Avenge and Redemption though are two of the worst things you can pick up there because obviously you can't play it beforehand.
Right.
But on the other hand, Doctor Boom and Mysterious Challenger are pretty good. I heard, you know, so that's working out well for Zoro here.
Yeah, so some bad fortune, some good fortune, and an incredibly strong board. I mean, you already got the Doctor Boom
Wow.
on the field there, and that's 7/7.
This yeah, that's over. It's over, isn't it? I mean, what are you
Yeah,
gonna do? You can't
no way
play
to deal with
Sylvanas.
that.
This hand is the hand from hell for Lonely God here. I mean,
I mean,
it
to be fair, this should happen when you build a deck like Control Warrior that traditionally curves very, very high. Like, eventually, you're gonna have this happen. And yeah, there's a surrender coming out there. A really rough hand for Lonely God to deal with, and Zoro's gonna take another game.
right. And if Control Warrior can't beat 3 aggressive decks, then that's that would just be very disappointing there for Lonely God. It is 2-0 for Zoro and has aggressive Shaman. Oh, I assume it's aggressive Shaman, but he has Shaman remaining. Lonely God's gonna have to pick up a win with Rogue, Control Warrior, and Druid versus the Shaman. It's a very uphill battle here for Lonely God.
Well, all right, you can see there on your stream. Yeah, it's just one more game, and Zoro advances to the round of 8. We're getting dangerously close to that $50,000 prize pool for the top 4 players. So, It's just going to take what 3 more wins, and there you are in the finals. So,
I
or
believe you get money for getting to the round of 8, so this is actually pretty big for these players. I think.
oh, that's true. That's true. It is top 8 payout.
Right, so this is actually really big for these players. I mean, it's the difference between 0 and I don't know $1,000. I'm guessing. I haven't looked at the price payout, but
Yeah, all right. So the prize payout, the way that it works for the top few players is first place, you get about 25K, so half the prize pool, and you get a quarter of the prize pool for second place. So it's like it's 25K, then 12K, then 6K, then 3K, and then for finishing fifth through eighth, and then on down. Yeah, it's fifth through eighth, you get about $800.
right. So I mean, $800 versus $0. It's a pretty big deal. So definitely these players want to be winning this match, and then obviously it's $800 with the possibility for earning much, much more, and by much, much more, I mean that beautiful golden hearthstone. But in any case, we're going to be seeing a keep onto this Doomhammer. I do like the play here from Zoro. Not sure about the keep on the Abuser Sergeant, but you do kind of want, at least some sort of pretty fast start here. And wow, so Zoro has a interesting decision here between the Totem Golem and the Whirling Zap-Matic. Gonna go for the Totem Golem, and I imagine just going to curve into that Abusive Sergeant. But looking good for him so far.
Whirling Zap-O-Matic's really, really tempting, but hey, you got one of those anyway. got one anyway, because you can play it
Wow.
super early, and then you can just abuse the sergeant immediately afterwards. So
Right, so very good pickup here for Zoro on the Leopardum as well. And wow, we have LonelyGod going for a very greedy play here. Not getting out, not innervating out that Druid of the Claw. I think this might be a bit of a mistake here. As you see, Sir Finley Murgleton hit the hand for Zoro as well. This is exactly what you want. You want all your minions early, and then from here on out for Zoro, it's going to be all burst coming out of his deck, which is going to be amazing for him.
yeah, definitely. You've got a huge board. I think the only better start would be like Tunnel Trogs, but going for that Innervate combo to grab a Doctor Boom on turn 5, that's still pretty good.
Right, Innervate Dr. Boom is probably a pretty good answer when you're facing down a huge board like this. And yeah, we'll see what Zoro goes for. I mean, I can't imagine he, wastes time killing this Dr. Boom. Obviously it takes 7 damage to kill that guy, and that's 7 damage missing a face. But, I mean, we do see the swipe in the hand of LonelyGod, and so that might, play a huge part if these boom bots land correctly. But we'll see what Zoro goes first here. Gonna actually play a couple of 1-drops out, interestingly enough. Not going for that Whirling Zap-Matic and putting that extra, threat on the field. And the Druid Hero Power is pretty good. It basically acts like a Hunter Hero Power when you have the Doomhammer in hand. And sometimes it's actually even better because you can just use your Hero Power and get rid of something like a Druid of the Claw.
All right, well, it's still a pretty scary board. Actually, kind of for both players.
Yeah.
This is when being a druid it kind of feels bad because your version of board clear is swipe, and to a lesser extent the combo. But yeah, double swipe in hand though. That's still going to be a good way to keep himself from dying to all these crazy minions on the board. Although of course we know by looking at Zoro's hand, he's got plenty more where that came from.
Right, and that's the thing, right? If you play the swipe, you clear up, most, if not all of the board. But on the other hand, you're basically giving initiative back to your opponent, and if they have a strong play, then it can be very difficult. Looks like Langweixian, aka LonelyGod's gonna go for the minion route, which I can't disagree with. Just getting that on the field. But this Doomhammer is gonna have a lot to say about this. Do you think that Zoro takes the 8 damage here? That might be a consideration, just to have a
Yeah,
board.
especially, I mean, this isn't Reno Druid by any means, but it's still at least one of the ways that you can handle this situation is by just taking the damage and then sort of playing defensively afterwards. He does have a lot of defensive options. The best of which is that Harrison Jones against the incoming Doomhammer.
Right, so the Harrison Jones will be a big deal here, getting rid of that Doomhammer. It will prevent him from, or speaking of LonelyGod here, it will prevent him from playing Swipe unless he picks up something like an Innervate. Yeah, it looks like Zoro's actually considering going for the Argent Horse Rider rather than playing out this Doomhammer right away, and going to be able to clear this out and then play his own Whirling Zap-O-Matic. We'll see what is played here. from Lonely God. Actually, that's not too bad of a pickup here with those living runes. Now he has actually something to put in the field, and Zoro's actually kind of running out of damage here.
Well, both players are kind of running. I mean, both players. There we go. Both players are kind of running out of cards, so their options are going to be fairly limited. But I think the thing that's really going to turn this around is, when you have a very low hand size and your opponent's going to play Doomhammer into your Harrison Jones, like that's just way too big a swing.
Right, and I mean it'll help a lot here for Lonely God, obviously, but Zoro
Maybe
still hasn't
Zoro's
played it.
playing around this. You can see him saving the Doomhammer, even though it'd be great to clear out the board. And I think he thinks, okay, well, what's the only way that I lose? Well, that's a big way to lose. But if he can wait until he gets Rockbiter weapons in hand, then he can just get the burst out of it, and he doesn't care if it dies.
Right, exactly, and he can also use his hero power too to get that 6 damage right away. But I mean, I don't. Zoro could be playing around this. He could also be thinking that he needs a board first before he just plays out Doomhammer. Because if he plays Doomhammer first and then your opponent plays some minions, like for instance this Sludge Belcher, you don't really have. I mean, your minions now basically have charges coming turn because they're on the field. I mean, not really, but you know what I'm saying, right? They've already been on the field once. They don't have that. You know, the sleep sickness, whatever you call it. But yeah, so he just wants a board before he plays Doomhammer, which makes sense. I don't know if he's particularly playing on Harrison Jones, but it's definitely worked out well for him. This Sludge Welcher is really good card for Lonely God to pick up, though, because otherwise he would have maybe considered going with the Tempo Harrison.
Tempo Harrisons,
It would have
yeah.
felt so bad, right?
Oh my gosh, that's the worst feeling. That's where you're like, you go back to your coach and man, coach, I don't think I got it anymore. It's just like the some of the crazy things that happen. But
Ooh, I don't think this is. I don't think you go for this wipe here. I mean, you're not developing anything at this point. But gonna actually just start clearing up this board, and nothing is going to be on the field here, which means that even if, I mean, the thing is, even if Lonely God Harrison's next turn, I don't know if he gets anything else done, but well, regardless, it's going to be the Doomhammer coming on the field. This is what Lonely God has been waiting for a long time. It's going to be 6 damage to the face, and you know, that ancestral knowledge though is right on time for Zoro.
yeah, ancestral knowledge, beautifully placed. I think the only other better way to combo that would be with something like the Tunnel Trog, obviously. But man, 6 card draw off of this Harrison Jones is just ridiculous.
Right, let's see if he picks up anything that can be used. Does get the Wrath here, which he's probably gonna go for just to clear and not draw any more cards. Doesn't want to take any more damage here. So, I Zoro needs a lot of damage right now, or else I think he's going to be pretty dead. There's a couple of taunts plus the Loatheb in the hand of Lonely God, so obviously it's a pretty big deal. And picks up a Crackle, picks up an Owl, which is nice for the taunts. And interesting to see an Owl. I wonder if he's wondering. I wonder if he's running, excuse me, Owl and Earthshock in the deck, or just the Owl.
The Owl and Earthshock. Let's see. I mean, he's got the Owl already.
I mean,
Um,
we've seen Owl and Earthshock in Shaman before, but kind of interesting, right? Because you know, Shaman is one of the classes who has, other than the priest, who has actually a silence spell rather than the silence minion. And interesting to see him going with the Owl and going for the body rather than actually just running the running the Earthshock. But let's see how Langweixian deals with this. I should probably call him by the same name every single time, right? So let's see how Lonely God handles this. And wow, picks up an Innervate. That's actually really huge for him going forward. But going to be the Loatheb and the Sludge Belcher, and hitting the face with the Harrison. And Savage Roar pickup for Lonely God would be lethal the following turn. We'll see what Zoro can do right now.
all right. Well, yeah, just waiting for it. There's a Lava Shock, but even that's not incredibly effective right now. Pretty beefy, pretty scary board for Zoro to deal with. But I mean, as a shaman player, you're always, or like aggro shaman player, you're always just looking to deal as much damage to the face as possible. He's got that zap in hand. That could be up to 6 damage.
Is that lethal with
Oh
Druid Claw
yeah.
plus the Innervate Force in Nature? I think so. Oh, wait, what? He just misclicked.
Oh
Uh-oh.
no. What?
Uh-oh.
Oh no.
He was trying to hit the face and he misclicked. He's
You can
he's still
tell
probably
he's.
fine because he can innervate the Ancient of Lore and heal his face. But yeah, he literally just misclicked there. He had lethal, and he saw the lethal, guys. He didn't miss lethal. He just misclicked lethal, I suppose. Is there going to be a punish here? I don't believe so. There's no way to kill the opponent from Zoro's side. So, not punished. Just extended BM here from from LonelyGod, and yeah, Zoro is just going to have to give up the game. There's lethal on board, and LonelyGod is going to take his first game in this series.
Wow. Well, I guess that's that's one way to do it. Yeah, Lonely God. So not punished for a little bit of a mistake there, but still a great series shaping up between these two players. Not going to be a stop. Shrink and I were casting some Hearthstone where every single series in the entire tournament was like 0, or it was like 3-0, 4-0, and so it's nice to see a series that's pretty close. And I mean, for right now, it's not really even that scary a situation for Zoro. He's still got a couple games to play with. The scary thing could be if he runs it up against too much defense in front of an aggro shaman deck, it could just get completely blown out of the water.
Right. So looking forward to these next couple of games, potentially 2 games here. I mean, the shaman will probably be a bit of an underdog against the control warrior, but the rogue is kind of the big story here, right? Typically, rogue doesn't do too well against shaman because there's just way too much burst, especially with that Doomhammer. So we'll see if LonelyGod runs Harrison Jones in his rogue. It might be a necessity. We'll see if he also runs, he probably wants at least one heal bot, but it might be 2 heal bots, which would be obviously a big deal. So we'll see, how if LonelyGod is able to kind of pull the upset and get a reverse all kill here. Keep in mind, guys, these aren't the group stages, so single elimination, whoever wins this is moving on. Whoever loses is out. There's no second chances.
All right, well, here we go. We're going to see the draws for both players. It's going to be most likely Control Warrior versus this...
yeah, it is Control Warrior.
Likely, but yeah, Control Warrior versus Aggro Shaman. I think we all know how this game goes. Early on, Shaman kind of killing it, but of course, if that doesn't work out, then late game, the Warrior's just way too strong.
Right. So Justicar is a really big deal here. Wow, and there's the ball that we've been looking for the 2 games that LonelyGod lost earlier. So it picks up that, but not going to be too useful against Shaman. Typically, there's not too big of a board that you need to brawl. But yeah, if LonelyGod here can stabilize, then that Justicar can just single-handedly win him the game with that continuous tank up. Gonna be the Coin Feral Spirits coming out of Zoro, the only minion in his hand right now. Or I guess that counts as a spell too, but the only spell that creates minions in his hand now. And by coining into this, he has no play unless he picks up a 1-drop right now. I guess he can just lightning bolt this Acolyte of Pain if he wants to, but it's pretty painful.
Yes, Acolyte of Painful, even. So, unfortunately, that's the only thing on the board. You can lightning bolt this away, but always good to have those cards later on when you're looking to burst your opponent down. You got some spell power on the board. Even still, it's good to deny card draw, and you would have gotten some bonus off of that. Even still, everything's going to get cleared out by this Despite, so I don't think...
Whirling Zappamat is a pretty good pickup. However, it's going to just get taken out by the Cruel Taskmaster most likely. And wow, even an Armorsmith picked up. I think. Do you play out the Cruel Task as well as the Armorsmith?
Yeah, I think you play both of them just to get some armor. I don't think it's a win-win because you're either forcing your opponent to deal with them early, which is less damage to your face, or you get lots of armor from it, which is less damage to your face. So it doesn't decide to do that. It's going to save that for a little bit later on. Was one option, but going to be going for a little bit more board presence without degrading his board with all those whirlwind effects.
Yeah, I mean, not damaging your own minions makes them harder to kill later on, but I don't think the 1 damage on the Cruel Taskmaster was really anything to really worry about. And in addition, I mean, this Armorsmith, if you're spending another 3 damage killing the Armorsmith after having spent 3 damage killing an Acolyte earlier, you're probably in a good position. But in any case, there's going to be the shield block coming out from LonelyGod here. I'm actually slightly surprised he didn't go for the Justicar now to set up for later turns. It might have been worth his while. Though there is a chance that he just dies at 18 health. Not too likely though. So I kind of I wanted to see a bit of a more greedy play there from Lonely God, but unfortunately not going to be the case.
All right, well, Lonely God, we saw him come up big with a win to stay alive last game, but now he's actually in a pretty good spot to maybe even take this all the way to a game five, which is always kind of scary when you go down 0-2 and you come back 2-0 and you're like, okay, well now we got a game on our hands, but there's still a lot of scary stuff in Zoro's hand. He's going to be able to sort of pump up his Tunnel Trog. He still has that Doom Hammer to trade things out with. And
So we have our answer. There is an Earthshock and an Owl. I think you go ahead and use the Earthshock because
right,
there's maybe two
you have
Sludge
to limit
Belchers.
armor.
Yeah, there's maybe two Sludge Belchers, but there. I mean, there's nothing else that you want to really silence. Savants you don't really care about. So yeah, I do like the silence on this. Is probably definitely worth it here. Going to be the Shield Maiden as well as the Shield Slam coming out. And back up to 26 health is Lonely God, but there's a lot of burst in the hand of Zoro. He needs to pick up something like, start picking up things like Rock Biters now, though.
Yeah, Rock Biters definitely need to come in as early as next turn, just because otherwise you're going to be like sort of limiting yourself on that Doom Hammer. But even still, there's just a
Ooh.
crazy amount of damage to face here.
Rolls 4 on the Crackle, the lowest you can possibly roll. I mean, he did.
Unlucky.
Yeah, never lucky. He was able to get the spell damage totem, so in that sense, he was a bit fortunate. But I mean, he might have not even crackled if he hadn't rolled that in the first place. But yeah, a lot of damage on the board now. 11, 12, 13, 14. And there's even an Alex Jaws in the hand of Lonely Gods. I don't really see this going towards Zoro's way.
All right. Well, still, man, imagine if you could put those abusive sergeants towards your face on the Doom Hammer. Like that's the dream right there. But that's not going to happen. Do you use some of this burn to clear out the board? I mean, an obvious candidate would be taking out the 6/3 Justicar, just because it is so much damage.
Right. The problem is that if you do that, then you're probably needing at least Finley into the Warlock hero power in order to kill your opponent with getting the Rock Biters, because you've already used one Ancestral Knowledge, and it's hard to find the other one, and so and your opponent is also taking up every single turn. So any damage you don't throw towards the face right now is damage that you wish were going to the face, but yeah, it looks like it's just going to be a lava burst coming LonelyGod's way, and I think that Zoro might be setting up for if he draws into, like for instance, he draws into. Oh, well, he's just going to concede. I was going to say he might get Intestinal Knowledge into double Rock Bite or something like that, but it's going to be it. Doesn't want to reveal that he has an Owl, perhaps, although he did show that last game. But it's going to be a tied series, 2-2, and we are going to go into the last game to see who can advance to the round of 8. It's going to be the Shaman of Zoro versus the Rogue of LonelyGod.
All right, well, Shaman versus Rogue. Rogue, one of the big advantages in that matchup is just its ability to clear out early minions with things like backstab, SIA agents, eviscerate. It's really hard to develop an early board versus Rogue players, and I mean that's kind of what it's all about for Shaman. Now that being said, Shaman do have a lot of really sticky early minions with 3 health Tunnel Trogs. You're also going to be running Spirit Wolves, which are really difficult to take out, and we'll see who gets the better hand here.
Right, Harrison Jones is run in LonelyGod's Rogue, so we have an answer there, and definitely going to be keeping that card because you can't be taking that Doom Hammer to the face every single time. And LonelyGod, he's actually looking like he even picks up the Antique Healbot. The only problem is he doesn't have many answers other than just his dagger and this deadly poison as well. So that's going to be using up his coin right now, and that could be pretty painful later on. If he uses it, because it's, I mean, look at his hand, it's 5/5, 5/7, and yeah, so LonelyGod, I mean, his hand is pretty good as far as answers later in the game are concerned, but he needs stuff right now, and we might see him just pass on using his coin to take out his abusive sergeant because hand is pretty expensive.
That's true, and coin is such a valuable card. That's why you see Tomb Pillagers run in rogue decks nowadays, just because it's so important to have that. It basically gives you free combo activation on any card you want, and it allows you to just get that little bit of extra mana for big combos a turn ahead of time, which can be
Oh,
very effective at limiting the early game.
I'm not sure if it skipped forward ahead on your stream, but
It
it
did.
right. So let's see. Let's try to navigate this. So there was no coin used, and then just a turn to dagger to kill off the abuser sergeant, followed by the totem golem, and now just a totem up for Zoro. Obviously unable to use. Or you didn't have enough mana for either the Argent Horse Rider or the Feral Spirit, and didn't want to use the Ancestral Knowledge because it would have, stunted his following turn.
Right, and I think it's probably one of the best totems you can get right there. It eliminates using those deadly poisons to clear out anything. And wow, what do you really do here? It's a fairly high curve hand for a rogue player, which
Right.
is not something you say too often because their hands usually curve pretty low.
Yeah, I mean, well, they do have some pretty heavy cost cards to balance out the fact that they have those backstabs and deadly poison stuff like that. But he might. He's even like, leaning toward playing that. What? Wow. Okay. Um. Really?
Um, wow. Okay, well, that's
Wait.
somewhat questionable.
Why didn't he couldn't? If he's committing to blade flooring next turn, couldn't he have just re-daggered and hero powered, and then or
Add the
attacked and
extra.
then re-daggered and then gotten the deadly poison and then use it next turn? I mean, he's not.
And that's a terrible turn to Blade Flurry on too, because it doesn't even clear the board. He's able to clear it by redaggering there, but he's used both deadly poisons. Like those are almost win conditions, and to have them both gone so early. I mean, by turn four, that's that's limiting yourself a lot. And now, of course, we're just see Spirit Wolves come down. There's Tunnel Trogs left in there too. Whirling's Appomatic behind two taunts without a Blade Flurry. Like this is the turn you need to Blade Flurry.
I mean, yeah, he kind of put himself in that position. I mean, he did have an awkward hand. We were saying that the entire time, and that was his way of kind of navigating the awkward hand, particularly because he has now quadruple 5-drop in his hand to be able to play now. And I mean, if you think about it, if he had done the play that I mentioned, where he played just one deadly poison, he wouldn't have the ability to second deadly poison plus flurry plus redagger unless he uses coin. By the way, you don't typically see Sledge Belcher and Healbot in the same deck. Looks like a very defensive rogue, but not working out well for him at all. We're gonna see a Rock Biter here. That's going to be 12 damage to the face
Jeez.
of LonelyGod here, and that's actually just game. Wow, lethal coming out from Zoro doesn't need that Doomhammer at all, just needs a Whirling Zap-O-Matic. He is going to advance to the round of 8. I'm just kind of shell-shocked here, and so is probably LonelyGod. I mean, we're talking about how that game LonelyGod set up the reverse all kill there. Coming back from 0-2, bringing it to 2-2. He had the Harrison hand. There's all this crazy stuff going on with his rogue that was pretty unusual. Had Harrison, Sludge Belcher, and the heal bot. And I mean, seemed like a pretty defensive deck, but in the end, when you run that many 5-drops, sometimes you just get them all in your hand in the opening.
Yeah, really unfortunate.